Morning, good morning. Thank you. Please be seated. Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you. How are we doing this morning? I mean, how amazing is this? I always have a saying. People ask me how I'm doing, and I say I'm amazing. I'm still on the right side of the earth. And I mean that unequivocally. But I got to tell you, when I wake up in the morning and I realize I'm still on the right side of the earth, you know, there's one thing to wake up on the right side of the earth in, like, you know, Wisconsin or, you know, who knows where. There's a whole other thing to wake up on the right side of the earth in Maui. You know, the day's a little sweeter. So Penn Mutual, I want to say thank you guys for having me out, giving me the honor to be able to speak and talk to you guys about who we are and what we are doing, a little bit about life, because it's so critical. You guys are in the life insurance business. What we know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that life is finite. It will have an end. That is the one guaranteed thing along this path. And as someone who is living on a second chance, it's such an amazing opportunity to be able to get out and share these ideas and lessons that I've learned. So what I want to show you is something I have lived my life by. And I think it's so amazing that the motto of this conference is blazing the trail. Because in my military career, 21 years in special operations, one of the biggest things that we had to do was go down a path. We had to blaze trails all over the world, whether it was deep in the jungles of Colombia and Peru, whether it was in the deserts of Iraq, whether it was in the rugged mountainous terrains of Afghanistan. I have had to blaze a trail. And the interesting thing about blazing a trail is you have to know where you are going. And there are two components to blazing a trail and getting where you're going. There are two critical things that we have to have. Number one, we have to have a destination, a very clearly defined objective location on where we're going. I've met so many people who will give a very vague definition of where they are going. They're blazing a trail, but it's kind of this big, wide swath of where they're going to end up. And one of the most critical things that I talk to people about is you have to be very specific when you talk about your destination. In the military, we use grid coordinates to get where we are going. Well, there's a reason for that, because we need to know finitely exactly where we are going. Because when you use a compass and you set your bearing on where you're going to go, you need to know that exact location. Life is no different. Life is absolutely no different. So when you need two things to figure out where you're going, one is a very finite destination, and number two is that course, that bearing on where you are going to go. And I talk to so many people about that. So many people ask that question: where am I going? In life, in business, personally, as a parent, as a leader, where am I going? You've got to have those two things. You've got to have that clearly defined destination, and then you must know that course. And you must follow it. You must stay on course. You must stay on that bearing. And the amazing thing about life, especially when we are trailblazers, is there are obstacles. There are things in our path that will get us off course. And so many people don't pay attention. They don't look enough at, am I on course? And the interesting thing is, over time, the longer you go without making sure you are on that bearing, the greater the deviation from you getting to that finite destination. An interesting fact, if you were to leave New York City and you set an exact course to get to Los Angeles, over 3,000 miles, if you were off by 1 degree to the north, over 3,000 miles, you'd end up in San Francisco. So many people run their lives this way. Figure out what that finite destination is, plot that course. It is what has made all the difference in my life. And today, we're going to talk about how we stay on course, how we can be amazing trailblazers but make sure we get to that destination and we stay on course in all aspects of our life. How do we do that? Well, the first thing we're going to talk about is perspective. I don't know who the gentleman was who was up here talking about his brother and the individual that passed away, but I want to say thank you, because you teed me up so much for what I talk about in this world. The fact that these bodies that we walk in, we only have so much time. And how we look at the world around us and how we shape and how we impact and motivate and inspire other people makes all the difference in the world. And this one key word is one of the biggest things that I talk to leaders and teams about, because most people have poor perspective. I have been all over the world. I have seen some of the most oppressed and repressed parts of society. I've seen the most extreme levels of poverty. I have seen some of the most depraved levels of violence that is just hard to wrap your head around, that you could have a human being that could do such horrific things to another human being. And by doing that, by going all over the world and being able to come back to amazingly beautiful places here in the United States of America and know that we have this freedom and opportunity, it gave me tremendous perspective. It made me stop looking at all the little minor things that I watch people freak out over and take a breath and say, that's really not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. And I watch it all the time. I watch people lose their minds over the smallest things. And nowhere do I see this more than in airports. Oh, yeah. And I live in airports. I fly at least once a week, if not sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. And airports are fascinating places. They're like human aquariums. You know, you walk through the airport and you're like clownfish, triggerfish, parrotfish, ooh, shark. So as you're walking through an airport, though, it's an amazing place because people are on their journeys of life. They have a destination, and they're plotting a course to get there. The reality is, for some of them, though, they're going in the exact opposite direction of where they want to go. And they're talking about it, where they want to go. Just listen to the conversations around you in airports. And you listen to extreme excitement. You listen to sorrow. I see the most high levels of loss of perspective, though, when things start to go wrong when we fly. When people think they're going to take off at a certain time and the flight gets delayed, there are problems. Oftentimes, the biggest levels of angst that I see is when you get on the plane and you're waiting, and it doesn't matter what the temperature is outside. It's 150 degrees inside that plane. And all of a sudden, that message comes that you know is coming, and the pilot goes, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but we've got a mechanical problem that we cannot fix. I'm going to have you deplane. You're going to have to go to the service desk and rebook your flights. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience. And in that moment, I watch people melt down. I watch people freak out. They're jumping on their phones. You would not believe this. And as they grab their stuff and walk off that plane, you would think they were systematically being executed the second they stepped out the door. And the number one thing that I hear when this occurs, and I watch these people around me, is, oh my God, what a bad day. What a bad day. And I'm fascinated when I hear this. I'll be honest, it makes me laugh a little bit on the inside. I'm like, really? This is your bad day? I don't know about you. I don't like flying on broken airplanes. It's not my thing. You know? So I'm kind of like, hey, pilot, thank you. Love you. But I always ask people, I'm like, hey, what's so horrible? I understand that you're a little bit inconvenienced, but, you know, what's so bad? 95% of people, when they say this phrase, I've had a bad day, or what a bad day, it is merely a disruption in how they thought their day was going to unfold. You see, the reality is, when I talk to people about a bad day, it is a catastrophic event that will forever leave an impact on your life, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental. You'll never fully recover. And thankfully, as we walk along on this journey of life, most of us only encounter a handful of true bad days. And for most of us, if we look at it with perspective, it can make us better. It can motivate and inspire others to greatness. And that is how I now live my life. Let me tell you about my bad day. A little over 10 years ago, I was leading probably some of the best warriors on the planet, a team of Navy SEALs, and we were going after mid-level and high-level al-Qaeda leaders in Iraq. Very productive deployment. We had aided many individuals, whether we incarcerated them or we aided them on their way. But it was a very successful deployment. And on one of the very last missions of our deployment, my team and I walked into a very well-executed ambush. And I found myself on the wrong end of about 15 or 16 enemy fighters, 2 machine guns that caught me in a crossfire, stitched me across the body, 2 rounds in the left elbow that I thought shot my arm off. I was taking rounds off my helmet. I had my left night vision tube shot off. The only thing behind us was several thousand yards of open desert and like a large John Deere tractor tire. And my team had fallen back to that tire as I was taking this fire, and I was trying to shoot, and I turned to move back to that last point of cover when one bullet from the machine gun caught me right in the face. It hit me right in front of the ear. It traveled through my face. It took off my nose. It blew out my right cheekbone. It vaporized my orbital floor. It broke all the bones above my eye. My eye dropped down into this newly found hole in my face. It destroyed the head of my jaw, and it shattered my jaw down to my chin. My teammates watched as I was hit, fall to the ground, and they thought I was dead. The reality is, I just was knocked unconscious. And to this day, they give me a lot of grief about that, you know? Seriously. I still have friends to this day that are like, Red, dude, 1 bullet to the face and you pass out? You're a Navy SEAL, bro. You need to represent. So sad to say, there I am, passed out on the ground in front of my team as this massive firefight literally was raging directly over me. When I came to this day, I don't know how long, 5 to 10 minutes, I was probably unconscious. When I came to, I literally was watching tracer fire, bullets from a machine gun that have phosphorus that glows in the air as they fire. It looks like a laser beam. And I literally was watching tracer fire travel about 8 inches above me. And I was bleeding out. I was dying. I was going through the physiological process of dying because I was leaking all my blood into the ground. You reach a point where your body can no longer, it's not maintaining its pressures. So things start to happen. It starts pulling blood into your core. I started losing the ability to move. It got harder and harder to breathe, and I reached a point where I came to the grips with the fact that I probably was not coming home, that I was going to die right there in the middle of this firefight in Iraq. And in that moment, my mind went to my wife and went to my kids. At that point, I had an 8-year-old son, I had a 3-year-old daughters, and I was heartbroken with the thought that I was not going to go home to raise my son to be a strong young man, that I would never walk my daughters down the aisle, that there would never be another Christmas, I would not get to dress up for Halloween with my kids. That was heartbreaking. And as I lay there and thought about those things, I got angry. I got angry that I'd gotten into that situation. And I got angry at the thought that fighting this vicious enemy, that I may be deprived of watching my kids grow up. And I thought to myself, I have to make it home. I have to figure out a way to get home. And this thought popped into my head in that moment. You can call it fate. You can call it your inner self. You can call it divine intervention, whatever your beliefs are. In that moment, this thought popped into my head. I had watched a show called Baghdad ER. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen it. It was about our amazing military medical professionals and taking care of our wounded warriors as they came into the combat support hospitals. And there was a statistic that they gave during that show that stuck in my mind, and it popped into my head in that moment. And the statistic was this: if our wounded warriors showed up to the combat support hospital operating rooms with a pulse, they had a 90% chance of making it home alive. And that was the thought that I grabbed onto. And I told myself, stay awake to stay alive. Stay awake to stay alive. If you have to reach into your own chest and compress your heart with your own hand, you are going to show up with a pulse. I don't know how much longer it took. We estimate 35 to 40 minutes before we finally managed to win the firefight, and we called in the medevac helicopter. The medevac helicopter came in, they loaded me onto it, and they literally flew the rotors off to get me to the Baghdad Combat Support Hospital. They took me off the helicopter, they wheeled me into this outer room, and all the time I'm thinking to myself, stay awake, stay alive, stay awake, stay alive. They started pulling all my gear off. I got to remove all the bombs and bullets and knives and guns and all the things that us dirty snake eaters take to take the fight to the enemy. I could feel them tugging, and I was like, you're almost there, Jay. Just hang on a little bit longer. And it was the most insidious thing. Try to imagine the highest levels of fatigue you've ever felt in your life and amplify that by 1,000. Everything in me said, just let go. Stop fighting. The fight's too great. Just let go. Just go to sleep. Because that's what I wanted to do. My body, every breath was like a marathon. Every breath felt like it took every ounce of energy I had to stay alive. So as I'm out there and they're pulling my gear, I'm thinking, you're almost there. Just another few seconds. They wheeled me into the operating room, and all these doctors and nurses ran out, and they're starting to bark out orders. And I'm thinking to myself, you made it. You made it. You have a pulse. You have a 90% chance of making it home alive. And you can let go. You can drift off into that darkness, and even if you die, you know, I'm sure somewhere in this operating room they got a car battery and jumper cables, and they'll, you know, bounce you back to life. And as I was drifting off, there was a young nurse on my left side. In the military, we carry different lines of gear. Our backpack is what we call third line gear, and it's mission essential things you need, maybe warm clothes, food. Second line gear is what we call our load bearing equipment. It has things you need specifically for the mission and to fight the enemy. And then first line gear is if you had to ditch all that, it's normally worn on your belt, maybe in your pockets, but it's signaling devices, maybe water purification devices if you had to be on escape and evasion. But on my first line gear, I used to carry a grenade right here on my belt. And they had missed it. And this young nurse found it. And they don't like explosives in the operating room. This young nurse found my grenade and promptly announced to the rest of the operating room, he's still got a bomb on him. And literally it reminded me of something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. You remember the Roadrunner? That's what it looked like. Nothing but clouds of dust as they all ran out of the operating room. And I remember looking around thinking to myself, you have got to be kidding me. I'm dying here. I was like, I got nothing left. Who's gonna jumpstart me when I die? And the final thing I remember as I drifted off was, oh my God, what a bad day. That's a bad day. That is a day that forever left a mark on my body. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. I will carry those scars to the grave. But it's also a day that forever changed me. A launch point, if you will, to recognize that I got a second chance. And when I look back on my life, and I look back on the amazing lessons that I learned, both the good and the bad and the knuckleheaded things that I did. And trust me, I was a big knucklehead. I did a lot of knuckleheaded things. I look back and I said, man, if I could go back to young Jason Redman when he was a 17-year-old kid and signed up for the Navy to become a Navy SEAL, what would I tell him? What advice would I pass along to him to be successful, to be better, to encounter all these hard situations he encountered in his life, to make them a little easier? And all these things popped into my head. And I drilled them down to 6 core things, 6 tenets that I try and live my life by now. They're things that can help you be successful. Most importantly, they're things that, when you are blazing that trail, keep you on course, allow you to reduce the amount of deviation that will have you off path, that will allow you to get to that specific destination, to accomplish your goal, and to lead a balanced, fulfilled life. Because I got to tell you, most of us only get one shot. Not all of us are fortunate enough to have a second chance. That's what I want to talk about today, the 6 tenets of success. Number 1, overcome. If you notice in my video, this is my word. This is my mantra. More than anything else in my life, this is the single greatest thing that has enabled me to find success, has enabled me to overcome and get past massive amounts of adversity. And when I look at this word, a simple word that says, I will never let adversity defeat me, I've boiled it down to 3 key things that enable what I call the overcome mindset. And if you can follow these 3 things, I can assure you, you will get through virtually any hardship you encounter in your life, whether it's personal or whether it's in business. Rule number 1, never quit. And this sounds like a very simple thing. As a matter of fact, when I was getting ready to go to SEAL training as a young 18-year-old kid, I met a SEAL for the first time. And I was kind of, giddy and enamored. And I was like, Petty Officer so-and-so, hey, Seaman Recruit Redmond, I'm getting ready to go to BUDS, to SEAL training. I was like, do you have any advice for me to make it? And the guy looked at me with disdain, and he goes, yeah, don't quit. And he turned around and walked away. And I was like, that's stupid, is what I was thinking. I was like, of course I know not to quit. Everybody knows that. The reality is, in this day and age, I watch people quit all the time. They make up excuses as to why they cannot move forward. And they couch it in all kinds of different terms. Oh, it was the right thing to do. It was the smart decision. You're quitting. Here's the problem with quitting. Quitting guarantees only one thing. You see, there's all these external factors that play in as we walk this road of life. Whether it's in business decisions, whether it's personal decisions, family decisions, community decisions, it doesn't really matter. There's all these external factors that impact where we are going. No different than when you plot that course. The obstacles you come across, bushes, trees, rocks, streams. If you're walking through the woods on a course, all these things get in your way. Those are the external factors. You can try and adapt to them. You can try and do a good map study and understand what's there and plan for it. And that's what we should do. But the reality is, we cannot always predict what external factors are going to impact us. Because you see, when we quit, it guarantees failure. Because we are the only thing that we can control in that moment. We can't control the external factors. We can only control ourselves. That day as I lay there bleeding out, and I told myself, stay awake to stay alive. So many external factors out there that could have impacted whether I'm here or not. It was a Special Operations Aviation Regiment Black Hawk helicopter with a flight medic on board that landed for that medevac. If it had not been a flight medic, I probably would not be here today because he was able to start working on me immediately in that helicopter. But what if before I ever got on, I had given in and I had said, let go, Jay, just quit. I wouldn't be here. The ultimate failure. Number 2, don't mentally quit. And this one is kind of a little harder, but I watch people do it all the time. They get into difficult situations, they're up against some really hard adversity, and they're starting to think about quitting, physically quitting. And their drive is down, their morale is down, and they quit mentally. They haven't physically done it yet, but they're not giving it their all. They've stopped pushing to try and be successful. I see this a lot in sports, where a team is down by so many points they convince themselves there's no way we can win. And they buy into this no-hope mentality. They have mentally quit at that point. The problem is, when you mentally quit, you're on the downslope to physically quit. And this is very dangerous as a leader, because as a leader, it's absolutely critical that we have to motivate not only ourselves, number 1, we have to motivate and inspire others to move forward. And if you start to buy into mentally quitting within yourself, you are going to plant seeds with others. In the SEAL teams, we have a group of individuals called breachers. And it is a breacher's job to get inside a target through locked doors, walls, windows, whatever it is. If we're going after a bad guy and they've got all kinds of defenses up, we need the ability to get in there. And breachers' jobs is to get into that building. And they are trained to the absolute highest levels. They can get through virtually anything. But it's not all the tools and the tactics that makes our breachers amazing. What makes our breachers amazing is the mindset that we teach them. We teach them regardless of what they come up against, regardless of what problem, adversity, obstacle in their path, they will get to the other side. We tell them whether they go over it, around it, under it, or directly through it, they will get to the other side. So that by the time they make it through breacher school and they get out into combat scenarios and they encounter their first real-world breaching problem, they don't see adversity or an obstacle. They see an opportunity to get to the other side, merely a problem to solve. Over it, under it, around it, or through it, they will get to the other side. This is the essence of the overcome mindset. So I encourage all of you, as you get out in your life, starting today, any problem you encounter, your first thought is, how do I get to the other side? Over it, under it, around it, or directly through it, I'm going to get to the other side. Don't mentally quit. And rule number 3, are you ready for this? It's the most important rule I'm going to tell you today. This is pretty mind-blowing. Nobody's ever heard this before. Came up with this on my own. Rule number 3 of the overcome mindset. Life is not fair. You're welcome. Okay, I'm done. Life is not fair. You know, it's so funny and so true. You can do everything right. You can have planned and researched on every external factor there is. You can look at years of data that says this is the end state that you're going to come to. You could have built the best team, assembled the best leaders, put together all the best training you possibly could have gone through so that there is statistically a 99.9999999% chance of success. And then something will go horrifically wrong. Train wreck wrong. And as you're laying there in the destruction, wondering how could this have happened, it's typically in those moments that people start to look at others to blame. Oh, it's so-and-so's fault. It's their fault. It's the market's fault. It's this. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Because the reality is so many people waste so much time because they thought they had this great plan, team, leaders, etc., and they can't understand how it could have gone wrong. Well, I'll tell you how, because life's not fair. Sometimes it doesn't unfold in the manner that you think it's going to. And you cannot sit there and feel sorry for yourself in that moment. It requires action. It requires the ability to step forward. It requires the ability to look at it and just say, okay, over it, under it, around it, or through it, let's go. SEAL training has an amazing way of demonstrating this principle. And they do it through something they call the room inspection. And during the room inspection, they tell you exactly how your room has to be clean. Uniforms have to be pressed. Bed has to be made absolutely perfectly. Your knife has to be sharpened and shined. Your underwater demolition life jacket has to be cleaned and taken apart. And the floor has to be shined to an absolute mirror finish without a single speck of sand anywhere on the floor. And I mean, you live on the beach. You're coated in sand all the time. But you do it. Every week, you get ready for this room inspection. You have one a week. And when it's time for that room inspection, you're standing at attention in your room, and you're waiting for the instructors to go through. You can hear that ball of fire as they go from room to room. You hear the chaos and the screams and the destruction down the hall. You're a little afraid. And they roll into your room, this group of 4 or 5 instructors, and they start to inspect. And as they're going through your room, they start making comments. Instructor so-and-so, this is an amazingly clean room. Oh, Instructor so-and-so, you are absolutely correct. It is incredible. Instructor, have you ever seen a room this clean? Unequivocally not. This is by far the best room I've ever seen. Senior Chief, what about you? In my 26 years as a Navy SEAL, I've never seen a room this clean. And you're thinking to yourself, we did it. Oh, we're going to pass. And all of a sudden, the Senior Chief walks up to the senior man in the room, and he says, Petty Officer so-and-so, this is a great room. Really, really good. But do you know what's wrong with this room? And like your heart breaks and falls in your boot? And the Senior Chief looks down, looks up, and he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a handful of sand. And he drops it on the floor. He flicks it in the face of the senior man. And he looks down, and he looks up, and he goes, yeah, there's sand on the floor. Fail. Drop down, start doing push-ups. Go grab your uniforms, grab your sheets, take all that stuff down to the surf zone. I want you to get totally immersed in that wonderful salt water in the Pacific. And then I want you to roll in the sand with all that stuff until you are coated from head to toe in sand in what we affectionately call a sugar cookie. He's like, and then come back to this room and we're going to do exercises until somebody quits. Is that fair? No. It's actually really cruel. I'm still seeing a counselor today. But what are they teaching us? They're teaching us that one principal thing. Life is not fair. And you can't sit there and feel sorry for yourself. You must overcome in that moment. You've got to motivate and inspire the people around you because you can do everything right. And you can't quit, and you can't mentally quit. You just have to accept, okay, over it, under, around it, or through it, let's go. Number 2, you have got to live greatly. This is an amazing life that you have, and it's an amazing world we live in. It is filled with opportunity. And I watch so many people that don't take advantage of the opportunities they encounter in life. So many unfulfilled hopes and dreams. Because when they set out on their life, 1, they didn't identify a good destination, and 2, they didn't plot a good course. There's one third thing that stops them from living greatly. I meet all these people that come up to me and say, hey, I wanted to do this or I wanted to do that. And I say, why didn't you? I've heard lots of excuses over the 5 years I've been speaking. But I came to realize there is one common thread in every excuse that I've ever heard. You know what it is? Fear. Fear is what causes people to not go after their hopes and dreams. That little voice in your head that says you're not good enough, you're not fast enough, you don't have enough money, you're not in the right place, you shouldn't do that, people may make fun of you, why would you do that, that's not the way you should do things, whatever it is. Fear is the number one reason why people don't go after what they want to accomplish in this life. I am a big fan of jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. I think it's fantastic. There's a reason why I like it and why I encourage every single person out there to go jump out of a perfectly good airplane. And it comes down to that word, fear. You see, when you are standing in an airplane with a parachute on and a tandem master, for those of you that haven't been through the training, you have to confront fear. Because make no mistake, when you step out of the back of an airplane, even with a parachute and all the training, you just committed suicide. All the way up into the point your parachute opens. And thankfully, you do all these things to make sure that the outcome is not bad. But people think about that fact before they jump out of a plane. You must confront that fear. Life is no different. Because when we're getting ready to do something unknown, when we're getting ready to move down this path of something new, when we set out a new destination, a new course, we are venturing off into the unknown. And as we stand on that ramp, so many people are too afraid to take that step and jump. So many people go back inside the plane and sit down and ride the plane back down. And they go the rest of their lives thinking about the fact that they didn't jump, that they didn't go after it, because they let fear drive them. My advice to everyone in this room, you got one shot. If you ever have the luxury of facing your own death, like I did, you will regret if you don't jump. Take that step and jump. Get out of the plane. Let that wind hit you in the face. Recognize the fact that you may fail, but so what? You will learn so much more from it. You will at least be able to look at others and say, you know what? I went after my hopes and dreams. And even though I didn't accomplish it, I learned so much from it. It made me better. So much better than those timid people out there who will get to the end of their lives and say, I wanted to do that, but I was too afraid and never went after it. And you will go off into the great unknown wondering, what if I had? The only thing stopping you from accomplishing greatness in your life is you. That's it. No one else. No one else can tell you you can't do something. In this nation, we have the freedom and the opportunity to go after what we want. And until you get out there and step off that ramp, you will never know. So live greatly. Number 3, you've got to love deeply. You probably had no clue that you were going to have some Navy SEAL up here talking to you about love. The amazing thing is, in my travels all over the world, in extreme combat, love is what makes this world amazing. It was the love of my teammates that I was willing to fight. It was my team leader who rushed forward through enemy fire to grab me and drag me back to that tire. It was that brotherly love that saved me, that enabled me to be on this stage. So many people get caught up in this crazy world we live in. The technology that we have, we're constantly getting beeped and chirped and tweeted and all these things that cause us to focus so much on work and email and all these things that need to be done. And we don't spend enough time with those we love. I'm telling you right now, if you face the end, all you will think about is what I thought about. My family, my friends, and how much I would have given anything to have a few more seconds with them to tell them I love them. I also watch so many people out in this world who are total jerks, who are just donkeys. And it infuriates me. You know, perspective enables you to realize that your bad attitude really doesn't have a place. You really don't have much of a reason. Unless you're truly having some catastrophic bad day. But even then, in my opinion, make a difference in the lives of others. Take a step back. So my advice to everyone is be nice. We can make so much happen in this world by being nice. I have learned how easy it is to end someone's life. It takes a lot more effort to be nice and motivate and inspire people. I think, unfortunately, that's why man is so flawed. There are some people that will resort to violence before they ever will try and win someone over. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard to do. It is a mindset that I could make a positive impact in the lives of people in front of me. One of the most deadly SEALs I know, we've all seen the Jason Bourne movies. He's a modern-day Jason Bourne. He truly is, like, I'm not kidding you. When he was born, I think he came out of the womb with like a katana sword and nunchucks, you know? Probably kicked the doctor as he came out, knocked out a nurse. He's also the nicest person you'd ever meet. And one time I asked him, I said, Mark, you're literally the deadliest person I know. I said, well, you know, I mean, you don't have to be. I just kind of wondered why you're also like the nicest person I know. And he said, you know, I've seen the most horrible sides of humanity. He's like, why do I need to be a jerk? I don't need to be a jerk. I want to see people happy. He's like, well, besides, you know, if they're a jerk to me, I'm just thinking to myself, you know, I could kill you. He's right. So you got to love deeply. We collect all this stuff in life. This world we live in, we like stuff. And don't get me wrong, I like stuff too. But I'll tell you what, when I lay there dying, I did not think about any of my stuff. I did not wonder what my truck was doing, if it missed me. I did not wonder if my motorcycle wished I could be there with it riding. I did not go, man, I wish I could have one more ride. I did not go, God, I wish I could check my investments right now. I wonder where they're at. There's a country song out there about a trailer hitch on the hearse. I love this song because the idea is that some people, you know, what he said is, I've never seen a hearse with a trailer hitch and a trailer behind it because you can't take that stuff with you. The only thing you can do and the only thing that's going to matter in the end is those relationships you forged and sustained in this life. And I tell you, when you truly have a bad day, it's when they're going to matter the most. I have been to over 50 memorials and funerals for friends that I've lost since 9/11. In cemeteries all over this country. In every cemetery, memorial, and funeral I've been to, I've walked through and looked at the gravestones. You know what I've never seen on any gravestone in any funeral that I've ever been in? These words. Wish I worked more. Never. Nowhere have I seen that. Why? Because life is about balance. It is about the relationships. It is about the journey. All this stuff is great. Find that balance to love deeply. Take that time to call your kids and your close family and just say, hey, I just wanted to call and say I was thinking about you. And you know, I love you. I hope you're okay. Because if a Navy SEAL can stand up here and tell you that, you can do it too. Number 4, stay humble. I almost ended my military career by my arrogance. I reached a point about halfway through my career where I was truly excelling. I was a young enlisted leader. I was like number 1 in all these things. I got selected for a commission. I graduated number 1 out of the largest ROTC battalion on the East Coast as the student battalion commander, ranked number 1. Stepped back into the SEAL teams thinking I was God's gift to leadership. And it was my arrogance that almost was my downfall. I almost got myself kicked out of the SEAL teams because I didn't want to listen to anybody. This picture on the screen was when I finished Ranger School. Actually, that's a picture of me. That's a darn good look. Oh, that picture. This is when I graduated Ranger School. And I got sent to Ranger School because they knew they needed to humble me. They sent me on a journey to learn more about myself, to learn more about what it is to be an effective leader, to learn more about that when we are leading people and we were trying to accomplish a goal, it's not about you. It's about both the goal and the people you lead. And you're last in the spectrum. And I had to learn those lessons. So the leaders that I've led underneath, there were three things that made them the most amazing leaders I've ever seen. It's what I aspire to now. Number one, they were selfless. They put themselves last in the spectrum. Number two, they had incredible humility. No matter what levels of accomplishment they had, they did not hesitate to stop and understand you and what was going on and your problems and how they could help make an impact in it, no matter how busy they were. And number three, they had respect for the position they held and for the people they led. Stay humble. Good leaders think about the end state and others before themselves. Pride has destroyed more men, women, and organizations than all wars combined. Stay humble. Number five, lead always. This is a key one. And I have three rules to leadership. I know they're effective because they work for me, and now I'm getting out. I teach classes on the evolution of leadership. I know it makes a difference. Those three rules are, number one, you must lead yourself. Most people mess this up. I watch all kinds of leaders who they're more focused on, yeah. They want to blow right over that. Yeah, lead yourself. Pfft, tell me how to lead people. I'm like, well, 80% of it starts with rule number one. Because if you have the ability to lead yourself, it makes it relatively easy to lead others. And number three, once you choose to be a leader, you've got to lead always. In everything you do. You see, leadership is summarized by one word: credibility. Credibility is the currency of leadership. And it starts with you. How do I know? Because I've walked that path. I have failed tremendously. And one of the big lessons I learned when I was going through Ranger School was I had failed to effectively lead myself. You see, we have a phrase, you guys have all heard it, but the military uses it all the time, called leadership by example. And it's such a trite phrase until you really drill down into the mechanisms behind it. And I watch so many people who are leaders in companies on the civilian side now who instantly think good leadership is their ability to lead others. But they're doing a very poor job of leading themselves. You see, we must have balance in how we lead. To be a leader in our family, leader in the community, leader in our business, and most importantly, our ability to lead ourselves. How well do we take care of ourselves? To be a leader takes tremendous amounts of energy so that we can stay motivated, we can stay up, we can motivate and inspire other people, we can make time to talk to them and understand who they are and their problems. 80% of leadership starts in rule number one, our ability to lead yourself. So many people think leadership and your ability to lead others happens here with the words that come out of your mouth. But I'll tell you right now, by the time this happens, you've already won or lost someone because 80% happened in rule number one. You've already built your credibility or damaged your credibility before that ever happens. Your ability to lead others, more often than not, doesn't have to do with the words that come out of your mouth. It happens to do with your actions and your attitude prior. I learned this lesson in an amazing way in the hospital, about 5 days after I got to Walter Reed, or Bethesda at that time. And I'll tell you what, I was feeling sorry for myself. 5 days earlier, I was at the pinnacle of my career, leading literally the best men on the planet. And we were only 1 week from going home, and I had screened to go to a higher level special mission unit. And I was in probably the best shape of my life. And now I found myself in a hospital bed, so weak I couldn't even get out of bed, with doctors telling me I couldn't move my arm at all. doctors telling me they were going to amputate my arm. I had not looked at myself in a mirror because I was terrified of what I was going to see. And I was feeling sorry for myself. And the nurse came in and said, hey, Lieutenant, you've got a visitor. There's a young Marine who'd like to say hello. And I was like, no. She's like, I really think you should meet this young Marine. He's really excited to meet you. And I wrote to her because I couldn't talk. You see, I was trached, wired shut. I had a stomach tube to eat from, disfigured. I was having a pity party. Party of one. I told that nurse no. So she putzed around the room for a couple of minutes, let me wallow and celebrate in my pity party. Woo! And she said, I really think you should meet this young Marine. So finally I relented. Fine. This young kid wheels in. He can't have been more than 18 or 19 years old. And he's missing his leg below the knee. And he was like the Energizer Bunny as he came in. Like literally, he's bouncing in his chair. Hey, Lieutenant, it's so great to meet you. I work with Navy SEALs in Fallujah. You guys are some of the best people I ever worked with. You guys taught us how to clear rooms and blow stuff up and sniper and do things. And I learned so much from you guys. You guys were courageous. You guys were amazing. And I was like, whoa, too much. I was like, I'm not prepared for this. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say with that level of energy, for one thing. So I looked down and saw him missing his leg, and I wrote out on my notepad, missing your leg. That sucks. And he reads it, and he looks at me. He reads it, and he looks at me, and he goes, missing my leg? He's like, you got shot in the face, and you're still here. That's awesome. Something snapped in me at that moment. I realized this young Marine came into my room looking for motivation, looking for leadership, because he had worked with other SEALs, leaders, who had done an amazing job of leading in the most chaotic, austere, and complex dynamic environments on Earth in combat. And he came in that room expecting the same thing. He could care less that I was feeling sorry for myself, that I needed a nurse to get out of bed, that I was facing the prospect of having my arm cut off. That didn't matter to him. Not that he didn't care, but he had an expectation of leadership. You see, as a leader, we have the ability to impact in a positive way anyone we come in contact with. That's why it's so critical sometimes to push back what's going on within ourselves and recognize maybe there's healing in my ability to impact other people. And I realized in that moment what an impact I could make on that young Marine and any wounded warrior on that ward. And I told myself, there's no room to feel sorry for yourself. You are a leader. Step up. A few days later, that became absolutely clear when a couple other people came into my room feeling sorry for me. I was drifting off, and they started having this great conversation off the end of my bed in whispers. Oh, what a shame. We send these young men and women off to war, and they come home broken. They'll never be the same. They'll never be effective members of society. He'll probably just be holed up in a VA somewhere, useless. They left, and my lovely long-haired admiral came back in the room, and I looked at her and said, give me my notebook. And I said, never again. Never again is somebody going to come into my room expressing pity and sorrow when I refuse to do so myself. Because I insist on, I'm going to lead myself out of this. And I want to lead others. I want to lead others in that moment. And without really much thought, I penned out this statement. And I said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming to this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country I deeply love. I'll make a full recovery. What is full? That is the absolute utmost physically I have the ability to recover. Then I will push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you are not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management, because, I don't know, it made sense. I told my wife, I said, put that on the door. Nobody's allowed into my room unless they read this. That sign went on to impact people all across the hospital. Somebody took a picture of it, and it went viral. And it started to impact people all across this nation. So much so, I got invited to the White House to meet President Bush because of that sign. That sign still has an impact to this day. I have people that have gone through life ambushes, truly bad days, find it, and they've put it on their hospital door, and they write to me and say, thank you for motivating and inspiring me. This is the essence of leading always. You never know when you're going to have an impact on somebody. That critical moment when you're feeling sorry for yourself and you could positively impact your kids, your spouse, your business, a stranger you meet on the street. It could have a lifelong effect. Lead yourself, lead others, lead always. The last tenet of success: live a life with no regrets. You got one shot, most of us. Like I said, I am living on a second chance. In that moment when I laid there dying, I had a lot of regrets. My friends like to joke with me that on my journey of life, there's the hard way, there's the easy way, and there's the Jay Redmond way. Because I'm a knucklehead. I'm super stubborn. And people would give me advice, and I would ignore it, thinking that my way was better. And sometimes I made bad decisions. And I'll tell you, when you lay there dying, you have the luxury of facing your death, you will look back on all those moments. You will look back on those things, those hopes, those goals, those dreams that you had talked about doing that you never went after. Those things left unfulfilled. You will look at the bad decisions you made, and you will regret them. And you will think about those people you love and how you wish you had told them just one more time how much you love them. So I tell people now, every decision that you make in this life has an impact. Some are little, some are big. Every decision you make, take a second to think about, how is this going to impact me in the long term? How is this going to impact my credibility as a leader? Most importantly, is this a decision that someday, when I face the end, will I look back and say, that was the right decision, or I wish I hadn't done that? Because my hope is, when you get to the end of your life, and you have a little bit of time to reflect, you will go out and you will say, I did it right. No regrets. In closing, I hope today you will take 5 things to heart. 5 key things. If you haven't written anything down, I encourage you to write these 5 things down. I encourage you to live your life in this manner. I will assure you, you will find success and balance. Number 1, live greatly. If you ever had a hope, a goal, or a dream, and you are standing in the door of that aircraft, and you're terrified of jumping, and all you're thinking about doing is going and sitting down, jump. Today's the day. You gotta live greatly. Whether it's a business decision, personal decision, it doesn't matter. Step out of that plane. Number 2, lead always. It starts today. Start leading yourself physically, nutritionally, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Lead yourself. You will find out how much easier it is to lead others. And then make that choice that you're going to lead always. Everything you do, remember, credibility is the currency of leadership. Number 3, overcome all. Build that overcome mindset, that relentless overcome mindset. We'll never quit because quitting guarantees failure. When we find those obstacles or adversity, over it, under it, around it, or directly through it, we're going to get to the other side. If you follow these principles, you've identified a very finite destination, you will be able to stay on course. And it's critical to do that. So many people get off course, and then they're dumbfounded why they didn't get to where they were going, why they didn't accomplish their goals. Continue to come back. Am I going down the path? Am I following that bearing that will get me to where I need to go? And I assure you, if you follow these things, you'll have no more bad days. And if you do happen to have a true bad day, you encounter one of life's ambushes that all of us will encounter, at least one in our lifetime, you'll be ready for it. And you will still set the example with these tenets. Okay, I run an organization called the Combat Wounded Coalition to inspire wounded warriors to overcome. I believe we're at a time in our nation where we need more leaders. I believe we're at a time in our nation where our younger generation needs some good examples of leadership and resiliency. And who better to get in front of them than young men and women who have been through such hardships, such as our wounded warriors. So last year, working in coordination with Old Dominion University, we launched the Overcome Academy, a leadership program for wounded warriors to get them back out in the community as leaders. A 2-week program with a year-long commitment that they have to go speak in a school, they have to go speak for a business, and they have to take on a mentorship role with a youth group in their community. We are developing the next greatest generation. We just completed the first one, and it was a resounding success. I had wounded warriors tell me this was life-changing. I absolutely needed this. Leadership, resiliency, goal setting, how to stay on course, and how to speak and tell their story with a purpose. I'm honored to say that we're working with the Travis Manion Foundation, who Penn Mutual is supporting, and in collaboration, the Travis Manion Foundation has a program called Character Does Matter, where they are getting into schools and talking about the key things that I believe in. So we've collaborated with them so that every Overcome Academy graduate will be working in coordination with the Travis Manion Foundation to get into schools and teach these principles to shape our nation for the future, a nation of leaders and resiliency. So I just want to say, for many of you, you guys have supported, we'll talk about that later, but thank you for what you are doing to help our wounded warriors. So, in closing, all I will say is thank you, go forth today, and lead always and overcome all. Thank you.